This year we're commemorating 100 years of the election of Valera in the by-election in East Clare in 1917. Now a lot of people would have known De Valera through politics and would have seen him, as having devoted his life to politics. But when he got involved in the volunteers and involved in 1916, the last thing that was on his mind was a long career in politics. And when he got the telegram on release from prison saying that Sinn Féin had selected him as the candidate for the East Clare by-election, he took quite a bit of persuading before he got involved in the election. He had, when in prison, been talking about reorganising the volunteers, and he had a healthy disregard for politicians. And therefore, it is surprising that once he got involved in the by-election, his natural affinity for politics came to the fore. Now, the other thing about De Valera that you have to understand is that where he had been a part of the physical force movement and believed sincerely in the volunteers and the idea of having an alternative army in Ireland dedicated to Ireland's cause, he also was a great follower of O'Connell. And what he believed in relation to O'Connell was the idea that if you got enough people to act together, if you got enough unity of purpose, if enough people said that they weren't recognising British rule, that you would make British rule impossible. And it's very, very interesting to see in the aftermath of the election how he, for example, urged everybody to wear the volunteer uniform because they couldn't put 100,000 people in prison, that he urged people to boycott the police. And again, you couldn't put everybody in prison, but he was organising on a passive resistance, undermining the authority of the British government here. But he was doing it in a very interesting mixture of what had gone on in 1916 and also building on the O'Connell tradition. The election, of course, itself was a very, very interesting election in that we all now know that the result was an overwhelming victory for De Valera. But you were talking about the stranger, the man with the Spanish name, a person with no familial connections with County Clare, up against a very formidable candidate in Patrick Lynch, a local, well-known and very honourable person. And the fact that De Valera won it by 71% to less than 29% to less than 30% shows the significant organisation that Sinn Féin were able to bring to bear. Big names came here, Collins, Markievicz, Count Plunkett, and also that they actually in 1916 had measured correctly the pulse of the people.
Not only here in Clare, but right throughout the country. There had already been 2 by-elections by the time the Clare by-election had happened. They had done well, they had won for Sinn Féin, but it was this election here in County Clare that really made that strong statement that the attitudes and beliefs of our leaders of 1916 were indeed vindicated. The people that took part as leaders in those times had very great moral and physical courage. And the Clare volunteers were among those. De Valera came to review them, and there was no less than 1,000 volunteers at that time, at least in Clare. De Valera said he couldn't have attempted the work that he did for this country, only for the unfailing support of the men and women of this great county, County Clare.
5,910 votes. Bit of hope. That's 71% of the vote. Right, quiet, please, quiet.
The Corker, I have come in your midst today to proclaim the Republic and to continue the struggle politically to re-establish the Republic of Ireland.
To most Irish people, De Valera, particularly nowadays, is a distant figure, a colossus that strode the political stage, and many people have great regard for him. A lot of people have a high disregard for him. But to me and to our family and to our cousins, he was a grandparent. And the actual person we knew is very, very different to the way he's often portrayed. He was very loving, very soft, good fun, understood children excellently. A small example I give is that there's a car that's now down in the museum in the library in Ennis, a Dodge car that he bought off Killeen when he became president of Ireland. And behind the front seats there are pull-out seats that you could sit in. And as children we used to pull out these seats and sit in them and get a lift to the end of the road. And when we got to the end of the road, we'd open the door of the car and we'd run home. And he allowed us do this time after number. He was very understanding about this, and he understood that this was a big bit of fun for children to sit in these special pull-out seats in his car. Here in Ennis today, we had a commemoration of the by-election, but also I think it was fair to say it was a commemoration of the life of De Valera and his connection with Clare. And it was a fantastic occasion because so many people got involved. I suppose the epitome of that was down in the in front of the O'Connell Monument, where we recreated some of his speeches and where the crowd were as enthusiastic as they had been in 1917. And so many ordinary people came out and enjoyed the day, got a feel for the history of the time, but also had this sense of occasion, and in my view, maybe a better sense than people often have of Eamon de Valera, and had a sense of the real man he was, how alive he was, and the real interaction he had, not only with large crowds, but also with the individuals who met with him. I'm thrilled that so many people put so much time into organising the event, and particularly they're all thrilled that so many people responded and attended, learnt a bit about history and enjoyed the event. Lá mór a bhíonn seo inniu hain, is iontoch go raibh starní de geschachtich I riamh a ríist, insint a ríist. Tásúna go bhain na stúte mór a tháinig seo inniu tainmh as a lá, agus le cúna dé be cumór go glórain as seo go can coppla bliain.